Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and our billions of viewers around the universe. Yeah, that's right. I said the universe because we're now intergalactic. We've been picked up by the Martian podcasting group, which, as you know, famous for many podcasts. Just kidding. We're not that famous. We're the Two Maesters, and we're back for another episode talking about Doctor Who.
Oh shit, Doctor Who.
Oh, excellent one, that one. Hey, Josh, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. And also loving that we're talking about your least favourite topic.
I know. But it had to be done. Sometimes in life, you just got to do what you don't want to do. And that's why I learned how to drive last year and haven't driven since, because it's totally useless in London.
That is true, especially with the new cycle lanes, the roadworks. It's awful driving in London, especially now you've got ULEZ and then congestion charge is going to increase. It's like every reason to not want to drive in London.
Exactly. It'd be easier to have a TARDIS to get through London, I'd say. And hence why we're talking about Doctor Who this week. I love the Daleks. So let's start off with what Doctor Who is in a very brief synopsis that's definitely not copied from Wikipedia. So Doctor Who is a British science fiction television series broadcast by the BBC since 1963. The series depicts the adventures of a Time Lord called the Doctor, an extraterrestrial being who appears to be human. The Doctor explores the universe in a time-traveling spaceship called the TARDIS. The TARDIS exterior appears as a blue British police box, which was a common sight in Britain in 1963 when the series first aired. With various companions, the Doctor combats foes and works to save civilizations and helps people in need. Does that sound like a fair synopsis?
Yeah, 100% it does. And I think one of the things that you do have with Doctor Who, you could say it's the biggest British sci-fi genre and biggest British sci-fi I would say franchise, because you do have like Red Dwarf, you've got I think one of my older colleagues was talking about one that was called something Babylon Babylon AD, Babylon 5 or something. I heard about, never watched it. So there's another one.
Red Dwarf though
is awesome. A really good one. Yes,
we should do an episode on Red Dwarf. That would be my
we should
childhood coming back. Oh my god, that'd be so good. And it's quite quintessentially British. It kind of puts us on the map along with the Beatles, Bad Weather, Bad Food, and the horrendous atrocities of the Empire.
Let's not forget Adele as well. Adele really does put us on the map globally.
Wow, the horrendous atrocities of the British Empire and Adele in the same sentence. Never would have guessed that. And it's interesting. Let's start with the popularity of Doctor Who, really, because, why are we talking about it? Because, quite frankly, I really don't like Doctor Who, but I know you do. But there are 3 periods of popularity. So 1964 to 1965 was what was called Dalek Mania. We'll go into who the Daleks are very shortly, where it's bringing about 9 to 14 million viewers per episode.
Wow, that is really big, especially for the UK.
Yeah, back then as well, like population around the world just mushroomed since then. And in the mid to late 1970s, this is when Tom Baker was one of the Doctor Who's, there was 12 million viewers. And then in 1979, the viewership peaked at 16 million people.
Wow.
But unfortunately, in the 1980s, viewership declined with 3 to 5 million people only in the late 80s. And then in the return in 2005, after a 16-year hiatus when Doctor Who finished up. 16 year? Yeah, 16. No. 11 year. I think I'm getting it confused. After 11-year hiatus, it went back up to 10 million viewers. So it's kind of been jogging around the same figure, but it hasn't really exponentially grown in 2005, despite population going up. I guess it's still quite a well-known British household brand, shall we say.
Yeah, and I think you do kind of see it with like long-lasting TV series that you then get the lull because things that your parents grew up with and you thought were cool that you would then, growing up as kids, you're like, yeah, but that's your thing, that's not ours. Like someone told me something like ABBA wasn't really liked by people who grew up in the 80s and 90s because they saw it as their mum and dad's music. And it wasn't until
it
wasn't until like they started releasing a lot of like the music on CDs, and then also having the Mamma Mia musical,
Right.
and then it's people started to then going back to ABBA, especially the older generation who grew up listening to it. Because there's
that's
probably things
interesting.
that your parents have watched or listened to that you're like, yeah, that's not for me. That's for you. I'm a teenager. I have my own type of music, my own TV shows I want to watch. But then as you get older, you actually they're not too bad. I actually like them quite a bit, because I think
Yeah, that's true, actually. I don't know what it is. There was a certain point where your parents' music and stuff was really lame and uncool, but then you kind of start to dig it after a while.
Yeah, and it's like you love it so much, the TV shows or the music from your parents, because that's all you're exposed to, and you grow up with it. But then you get to a stage you're like, you know what, I'm now into this. But then you grow up, and then I think it's like they say that TV and music can be like time capsules, because you then like when you watch an old episode, for example, of Star Trek, or when you watch like Dune, one of your favorite films from was it the 70s, the first one came out?
84, I think it was.
Like the first time you watch that, you then every time it comes on, or if you watch it again, you think to yourself, okay, this is how I felt, this is where I was when I watched it the first time. And then there's all that nostalgia element, and I think that's what played into its rise and actually people wanting it to come back, was that you had an older generation who had grown up watching it, who then wanted their kids and grandkids to watch it as well.
And same with Doctor Who. And of course, there's one thing you can never really forget, and that's the soundtrack, really.
Yeah.
Oh shit, Doctor Who.
Yeah, exactly. That soundtrack's so catchy, and even
and
I don't like Doctor
as
Who.
well. Iconic as well.
Exactly. It's something about it just brings back a lot of memories, and I remember growing up watching some of the older Doctor Who, especially the Tom Baker ones when I was a kid, but I think I was more into it when I was a kid, and then I do remember when they renewed it in 2010, was it? When was it they renewed it? I've got it here. So we'll run through the production history very shortly. But yeah, they renewed it in 2005.
Yeah.
And I do remember watching that first episode and hearing that soundtrack come back on was amazing, because it's so iconic in a way, isn't it?
It is.
Very catchy.
And I think the one thing I do like about it is that you do, when you listen to it, see that 1960s vibe, especially like with the synthesizer that had recently come out with the woo that they have in it. And I'm glad that they kept it throughout the series, because, you know, some shows would then completely change it. Like, for example, one thing that's nice is that Star Trek has its original theme from the 60s. Star Wars has its original theme from the 70s.
Yeah, true.
And they keep that going on.
It's part of the brand now, isn't it? Yeah. They do remix it, the Doctor Who one, and I feel the remixes still do it justice.
Yeah.
Of course, the original song's still pretty good, but the remixes are okay. They haven't ruined it. So we might as well talk about the production history, really, and then we can get into the characters and the Doctors, etc. So the first episode aired on the 23rd of November, 1963. Weirdly enough, it aired on the day JFK died.
Wow.
And the first episode was 10 minutes late airing because they had to talk about the murder of the most important person in the world. So a bit funny, because, you know, Doctor Who's talking about history a lot, and he time travels and weird events. Like, it's quite ironic that JFK died the day the first bloody episode came out. Like,
Oh shit, Doctor Who.
Yeah.
pretty crazy.
I did not know that, but that is... Like, imagine, like, at the BBC, like, okay, then our brand new flagship show, we don't know it's going to be successful. Oh, dear, we now have to delay it for 10 minutes. And it's like, imagine, like, you're about to put the cassette in, everyone's ready to be at home, and then finding out, bam, that JFK's just been assassinated. Like, how many people would have turned off that day because in shock that something like that had happened?
Yeah, because that's such big news. Even if you're not from America, and the UK especially, you'd be like, oh, my God, this is crazy. And it's like... first US president to be assassinated in a recent memory, but also they probably think it might have been part of Doctor Who as well. They wouldn't have known what Doctor Who's about.
I wouldn't be surprised if
then.
some people who were like, "Is this a part of Doctor Who?
Is
this a part of the episode? Is
God,
this true?"
This episode's so real. So yeah, originally the program was intended to appeal to a family audience as an educational program using time travel as a means to explore scientific ideas and famous moments in history. And I really do like that because it does teach, whether you like history or not. Like, I love history, but maybe this is where it started, because seeing him time travel to important moments in history. Like, there's one episode with, I think, with Matt Smith, where it's called Let's Kill Hitler. And he actually goes and I thought, I wasn't really fond of Matt Smith as a Doctor Who, but those sort of moments. There's one in like Britain of like, "Are you my mummy?" That was creepy. And sometimes it doesn't even matter. Like the Signs Blink episode with the angels. That's very iconic. Yeah,
and I think, funny enough, we did go to Comic-Con 2 weeks ago, and the previous one we went in May, a lot of people dressed up as the Weeping Angels.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and like even they had like a Doctor Who stand where they actually had the Weeping Angels there, the full-on statues, like full out claws out right in front of people, and it was a good picture op for people there.
That's
cool. It is something that is really iconic, and it's as iconic now, I would say, as the Dalek and also the Cybermen as well.
Yeah, I guess so. I didn't realise. I know it had a bit of an international appeal, but seeing it at Comic-Con when we went a couple of weeks ago, that was quite impressed to see that. Felt a little proud, even though I don't really like Doctor Who. Yeah,
and talking about an international market, like, I've spoken to people who are American who are like, yeah, I really love Doctor Who, because it's like something they can get, like, the British feel of understanding, like, what is British culture. Like, Americans love, like, Downton Abbey and Coronation Street, and some of them like EastEnders, because it's like, it's them trying to like understand what is British media and what is British culture. So they then go to, well, probably the three worst places, Coronation Street, EastEnders and Downton Abbey, to understand what British life is like. But I think they also love Doctor Who because it's like sci-fi, but in a different flavor.
It's quite delicate, isn't it? It's not too dark and not too intense and emotionally. It doesn't talk about modern day issues too much. It talks about key moments in history and stuff, but it's not about
galactic empires fighting other galactic empires, or the potential end of the universe. Well, actually, it does have
it
the
is
end
actually,
of the universe.
But it's not. It's in quite a like
personalized way.
It's kind of quirky, kooky way, like especially with how the Doctors act as well.
Yes,
and like how everything's designed. It all looks quirky. I mean, we'll get on to the different protagonists shortly, but there's Sonic Screwdriver, the design of the TARDIS. It's all very kooky and not too serious, which maybe makes it so palatable for people. So that's 1963. In 1970, the series began production in color. So you got to remember that Doctor Who started off in black and white. Like, that was the original OG Doctor Who. We're going through time and history and production here. In 1989, production of Doctor Who is essentially cancelled due to heavy declining viewership, which we noted down as about 3 to 5 million in the late 80s. In 1996, Fox Network actually took on. Fox Network premiered a Columbia Pictures production of Doctor Who in the USA, which obviously was more popular in the UK than the US, but essentially BBC had said in 1989, we don't want to do this anymore, and someone else took over. It seemed that it didn't run on for that long, because then there's that big hiatus between then and when the Christopher Eccleston Doctor Who took back off in 2005.
If I'm remembering correctly, I think 1996 might have been a film. I think what they did was just do like a film. I think my eldest sister was telling me that they actually did a film, and then that's what they kind of were trying to do. Like, oh, well, maybe if we're
it was a television film, yeah.
So if we're not going to have like a last season of it, we'll have a film that will end Doctor Who and then give it its last hurrah. But then, to your point, they didn't come back with popularity going towards it to then start it up again in 2005.
Yeah, I guess it's too iconic to have a franchise to end, and it's like they keep pumping out more and more Doctor Who's, and I'm just not watching them at the moment. I mean, we can't talk about Doctor Who without talking about, like, the Doctors. So, for example, the first ever Doctor was William Hartnell. Don't know much about him, and I haven't watched the original Doctor Who's. I'm going to go to some iconic ones, because otherwise we'll literally be here for 15 different Doctors. Tom Baker is probably one of the most recognizable old Doctor Who's because he sort of popularized the quirky behavior and quirkily dressed Doctor Who, and that's kind of what we associate with some of the more modern ones, like maybe less so David Tennant and Christopher Eccleston, but definitely Matt Smith, Peter Capaldi. I haven't seen the two recent Doctor Who's with Jodie Whittaker, and also one I'm about to reveal, but I don't know how quirky they are. But then the Ninth Doctor, Christopher Eccleston in 2005, that was only for a short run, actually, not for too long, but the point was Doctor Who was back and people were like, woo, Doctor Who's back! And
do you know why he only lasted a season?
Why?
He didn't want to be typecasted. so like he wanted, like, kind of like, I think David Tennant did it and Matt Smith did it in a way that they then will never be like, oh, the Doctor. So like you've got David Tennant in Good Omens. David Tennant's also gone over to America as well.
He's in Marvel stuff. Yeah.
And the fact that as I think he's called the Purple Man in Jessica Jones, the Netflix series. Yeah. He's also, as we've both said, in Ahsoka as well.
Yeah, so he was in Harry Potter for a bit as well.
So I think they were able to like have careers separate from Doctor Who. But I think Christopher Eccleston was like, I actually want to be seen as like an actual actor. So if I stay in the role, people might just say, oh, that's the Doctor.
He's a bit of a weird Doctor. He's very serious
and blunt and rude. especially to Billie Piper's character.
Yeah, Rose. Yeah, I know. Interesting. I guess it was an abrupt return for Doctor Who.
Yeah.
You had Christopher Eccleston, and then you had David Tennant, who's, I think, if I had to choose out of all the Doctors, I think he was my favourite, just because he was in for so long. He felt very natural and real. He kind of suited the like quirky look, but not too quirky. And there's some very key episodes of him. Like I think the Blink episode with him, or was that Matt Smith?
What was the premise of the episode?
The Blink, the Angels.
The Angels came in with Matt Smith.
Okay, never mind. I guess I'm trying to think. I think
one of the iconic episodes was The Waters of Mars, where they were on Mars, and it was like, I think this alien being which was controlling the water on Mars, which was basically flooding. And like one of the key lines that I think he either says or the head scientist on Mars that itself says that water is patient, water is slow, it can wait ages, it can wait years, it can wait for eternity, but it can't be stopped. And I think that was like a key line from it. And in that iconic episode, the scientist was supposed to die. So as history flows, it's supposed to die. But then David Tennant, I think this was a really thing I loved about his Doctor was that I think he'd been through losing so many people. He's like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to save her.
Okay.
And then by saving her, he altered the actual specific timeline. And she was like really angry because he kind of like gave a whole speech of like, oh, your sacrifice today will be so good and will help mankind to achieve further into the stars. But then at a point, he was just like, you know what? I've lost so many people. I'm the Doctor. He was in his feelings like, I'm the freaking Doctor. I can do whatever I want, and then saves her. But then I think some people who control the time then speak to him and say that because you've broken the actual timeline, you will be punished.
And I'm thinking about the TVA and Loki so much right now.
Yeah.
But what kind of Doctor, like what kind of Time Lord is this? Like he's not even living by his principles. We all know if you go back in time and like literally step on a mosquito, Hitler will be like still alive today, ruling the United States.
And they really showed it in like the first season when it came back, when Billie Piper saves her dad. And then for the whole like episode, there's a car driving around waiting to kill her dad. And there was like those monsters that would go around killing people. And it was because the timeline had been broken. So then Billie Piper's dad then sacrifices himself to then fix the timeline. And therefore the monsters vanish. And then also the car vanishes as well because it's a key point in time. And I think that's why I really love David Tennant's character, because he could be this quirky guy, but then if you really ticked him off, he could be ruthless.
Serious. He could be both sides
very, very ruthless as well.
Yeah, and there's quite a good feel of it, and we'll go into in depth what the hell the Time Lords are very shortly, but let's go through the rest of the Doctors. Then, of course, after David Tennant, we had Matt Smith, who, for me, I really didn't like Matt Smith. I found him sort of childish, too quirky. I think he was one of the youngest Doctors at that point in time. I wasn't really fussed with him, but he was he was in quite a few iconic episodes, like the Blink one.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't really watch that many, so you tell me.
So the introduction of the Weeping Angels, which is a really good episode. There was another good also with Matt Smith, they got new writers.
Right. Okay.
And also they got a new production. I think they got more money. So if you see from David Tennant's last season in 2010 and then to Matt Smith taking over in 2010, there is an actual change in the camera quality. You see like there's a major improvement. Also like the introductory visual has changed because I think they realized they'd made more money from Doctor Who, and also they were thinking, let's put more budget into it. So you had episodes linking to like Nixon as well. There was a key strategic episode where there was this alien species that were controlling humanity, and they could basically by sonic waves tell a human being to do something, and they would. And that they were escalating the Cold War for their own specific purposes. But the issue with these aliens is that if you looked away from them, you would forget they existed. So I think that which was a very clever plot, because then you see an alien, but then if you look away to tell someone that there's an alien, you've then forgotten they exist. You then come back, and then you completely forget them. So the way that the Doctor defeats them is that he basically speaks to the alien and says that, okay, then you're so dangerous. What should humanity do with you? And the alien says, you should kill us all on sight. He records it and plays it across the world. So then from that point on, anytime a human sees that alien, they kill them on sight. So like, for example...
Nice genocide. Well, humanity's good at that, isn't it?
I wouldn't say genocide if they're
evil.
If they're pushing humanity to nuclear war.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah.
So that was another critical episode. You also had the episode when you found out the River Song, who's a key person in the David Tennant's Doctor Who and also Matt Smith and further down the line, is actually the child of Amelia Pond and her husband.
Right, okay.
So that kind of creeped me out because I was like, so wait, the Doctor is dating their daughter?
He doesn't
and marries their daughter?
He can't do that. That's not right.
But they actually said, like, that's the only person he marries, because if you remember earlier on, she tells him his actual name and whispers it in his ear, and that's how he knows that he actually married her. And it's weird because the earlier he sees her is the later in her, part of her life. So she constantly gets, as the viewer sees her, she constantly gets younger. So the first time the Doctor sees her is on, remember the episode where they go to David Tennant's Doctor goes to that library. And
don't remember. No.
So there's an episode in Doctor Who, which is really also a good one, where they're in a library which houses all information. But what happens is they took the trees that was used for the paper for this library was taken from an alien rainforest, which had parasites which would literally eat human beings all the way down to their bones.
Nice.
So what happened was that the system, to save people, sent them all onto like a virtual reality world. So the Doctor actually sees her and she saves the day, but then ends up dying. And then throughout the series, as he gets to know her more, she knows less about him because she's going towards her actual demise, which I think is also a clever plot. And another thing, I know this is a long rambling, but
no, go on. We need
Doctor Who has there's an episode in Doctor Who that I think a lot of people forget is where humanity is on, I think, the brink of extinction, and he lands on I think it was with Donna when he was the Doctor.
Is that Catherine Jones?
Not Catherine Tate. I think it's the one before Catherine Tate.
Oh, right, okay.
So human beings get cloned. So the Doctor actually got cloned and actually has a daughter. And in the TV series, she basically sacrifices her life to save people on this, I think it's a space station. But at the end, she wakes up. And because I haven't watched further down the line, I don't know if they've expanded that storyline any further because she technically is a Time Lord because they actually cloned the Doctor.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Well, probably when they left. They're like, this is getting too weird. And the Doctor doesn't sleep with his assistants, does he? I don't know. We'll find out. Who knows? So Matt Smith, and then after Matt Smith, we had Peter Capaldi,
Yep.
who, to be honest, I actually quite liked, but I just really wasn't, as you know, I really don't like Doctor Who, but he struck me as a good Doctor Who. It's just, cause he's a really good actor, not that the others weren't, but him in he's been in the thick of it. He's great, fantastic. But again, didn't watch too much of him.
Just quickly, I think fans also forget he was in a series of Torchwood. I think it was Torchwood Series 3.
Yeah.
We'll probably get onto like the spin-offs later on.
Oh, yeah, we will. Don't you worry.
This was one of the spin-offs where an alien species were controlling children and basically telling children to do what they want. And they basically said that we need your children because I think they said that children are a drug that they can sell. And they said either give us, I think they said either give us like, I think, which is also something profound, give us, I think they said 10% of the children on your planet or we will kill all of them.
Oh, wow. That's
and then Peter Capaldi's character, the government basically said, well, if we're giving this initiative, you should then give your children. And it's like, damn, like how heartless. They're like, yeah, we need to, because I think he was the Secretary of Defense.
Right.
So he was actually the head civil servant. So they're like, well, we need to, I think the Prime Minister said, well, I'm not going to give my kids and we need to show to the people that we're standing with them.
Exactly.
So you need to give
example.
yours. So it's a sad scene. He went home, killed himself and his kids. Yeah. Yeah, and
that's
I think,
pretty dark.
and the fact that
that is really dark for Doctor Who. Wow.
But the thing is, that's Torchwood, and I think that's what Torchwood did was that Torchwood could be, which it was, extremely dark, and I think that's why fans loved it because it was like things you can't show in Doctor Who, but is a part of the Doctor Who universe that you can actually show in a specific capacity.
Yeah, they did want to expand it. Funny fact about Torchwood: it's an anagram for Doctor Who.
I didn't know that.
You arrange the letters, it's Doctor Who. Yeah, crazy that. So that's Peter Capaldi. And then 2017 to 2022, most recently, was Jodie Whittaker, who was the first female to play a Doctor. And it felt like a long time coming, to be honest, considering it was only till 2017 they did that. And then, surprise, surprise, after Jodie Whittaker, David Tennant again? What? Explain.
So one of the things they want to do is, as it's 2023, they want to have a huge celebration of the 60 years of Doctor Who. So they're bringing back David Tennant and also Catherine Tate as well to reprise their characters in a form of like celebration of 60 years of Doctor Who. And I think they still have the record because even though it did take a break, it still came back as the longest running sci-fi. Because they are Star Wars. I think the first one was
1970s.
I think 79 or 74 was Star Wars, and Star Trek was in the latter part of the 60s. So I think they are the longest running sci-fi.
Nice, good work, Britain. We're pumping out something that lasts a while. David Tennant is coming back again, just like a big anniversary.
Yeah,
is that not kind of rude to Peter Capaldi, Matt Smith, Christopher Eccleston, and I guess any other of the previous Doctors who are still living and they've not been invited to come back? What do you think?
I think it could be because he's the most... I think it's because he's the most visible Doctor. Like everyone,
I think he's the most iconic from the modern era, isn't he?
And I think also maybe the others don't want. I don't think Matt Smith wants to because remember he's fully tied in to House of the Dragon.
Oh yeah, and he's. I will say I didn't like Matt Smith as Doctor Who, but he's a great actor. Like I love him as Daemon Targaryen. Like fantastic, and he's kind of hot, I suppose. And then after David Tennant, I don't know how this is going to wrap around, but Nkuti Gatwa, who will play the first ever non-white Doctor Who. And I was reading up about this, that this new Doctor Who, if you look how he's going to be dressed, is going to be a reset. So it's going to be as if it's the Doctor Who from the 1960s. This is what I've read online, so take that with a pinch of salt.
So are they going to... So he's going to wear...
Yeah, literally, I've seen some images I've seen of him out there. He looks like quirkily dressed like he's from the 1960s. So they might go for maybe kind of like a Fallout thing of like that retro futuristic vibe, maybe how they design a TARDIS. But let's see. The internet is full of surprises.
Yeah, and it does sound like, if done properly, could be a really good idea to try and bring about all the people who've watched it throughout the years. If he especially if he travels back and forth during like the key things that happen. Like imagine if he did like
that would be cool.
Especially with like Sir Bobby Charlton passing away recently, a 1966 episode about England winning the World Cup, and then you can just imagine, right? Like in the picture on the side screen of actually no, they've actually done that in Doctor Who. They actually did. I think it was David Tennant. They actually did the day that England won the World Cup, but they could go back to that and actually go into the stadium.
Or maybe when JFK was killed, because that would be awkward, wouldn't it?
Well, they did bring in Richard Nixon into it, so...
Yeah, might as well bring in some more presidents.
And funnily enough, he did, in that episode of Richard Nixon, he did ask Doctor Who how he would be remembered. and then Matt Smith, Doctor, was like, "You'll be one of the most memorable presidents of all time."
Yeah, that's a good answer. Leaving him on the edge of a cliff, really.
Yeah.
I'm quite excited to see Ncuti because he's really good in sex education. I've seen him in loads of other stuff. Like, this will be very cool. I might watch it, I might not. If I've got nothing better to do, I'll watch Doctor Who when this David Tennant one comes out, because he was my favourite if I had to pick. So we can't talk about Doctor Who without talking about the recurring participants and also just who the hell the Doctors are, like, or who the hell the Doctor is. What is a Time Lord?
I think if you just break it down, a Time Lord is an alien species that travels the galaxy and tries to solve mysteries throughout the galaxy, to support others. And for many who don't know, like the Time Lords were, like Doctor Who is the last Time Lord, if you're not counting like the potential plot hole with his daughter. He is the Master. True.
That's not a plot hole.
Actually, that's true.
Awkward.
The
Called
Master
you out,
haha. And that there was a war between like the Daleks and the Time Lords, and the actual Doctor Who launched a weapon which is also like Order 66. Star Wars, like he's supposed to have killed all the Daleks, but it seems like he killed all but one of the Time Lords, but killed like some of the Dalek because they always seem to be coming back.
Right. Okay.
Because he was supposed to launch a weapon that would basically wipe out all of the Dalek, then had to sacrifice his wife and children and all his people to save the galaxy the universe.
That is pretty dark, actually.
It is, and from the Daleks. But as you can see throughout the series, it's as if like he can never fully get rid of them. And
they're pretty eternal, aren't they?
Yeah.
And who are the Daleks?
I used to know 100%, but I think based off what I remember, they're an alien race which wants to, I think, either exterminate all others or convert all others into convert all others into becoming a Dalek. And I think people also forget that there's an actual like small alien thing inside a specific Dalek, and
crab-looking thing,
and that's the actual Dalek, and everything else is just an exosuit.
Yeah, and they're created by some guy, one of the oldest villains called Davros, who looked kind of like humanoid, but then also was in like the lower half of his body was in the Dalek chassis, shall we say? But I don't know what sort of science is that. But the actual design of the Daleks is so iconic for Doctor Who, along with the Cybermen who we'll talk about in a second, as well as the post box, the inside of the post box, the police box. Whoops. Very iconic, and they've literally got a plunger on one hand, but it's just remained that way. And I'm kind of glad that they didn't change, because it stands testament to how iconic they look. They haven't have to have a major rebrand of them, and that's cool. And I'm like that, and you stick to your guns, Doctor Who. I still won't watch you, but I'm glad you did that. And I do remember the Christopher Eccleston series of Doctor Who, where the episode when the Daleks return in it. That was very cool and very iconic. And just they always come back every series, and there's lots of other alien races but I think it's between the Daleks and the Cybermen who are the most iconic.
Yeah.
And now onto the Cybermen. Do you know much about the Cybermen?
I think I remember from Dave. It was under David Tennant's, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, they did return under David Tennant, yeah.
That somehow he went to an alternate universe.
Yeah.
And that this person was basically building them to basically say, this is going to cause humanity not to die out. This will help us to live forever type of thing.
Lol.
But then, funnily enough, as usual, the robots rise up. And then, but on the unfortunate part of that is that they're not actual robots. They're basically humans who have been turned into robots.
Yeah, they're like cyborgs, aren't they? In a way, yeah.
So it's kind of like in Star Trek when you've got Borgs that they get taken and then converted into some kind of cyborg, which is controlled by a hive mind. It's very similar to maybe it wouldn't be funny if they took it from Doctor Who, that's very much what the Cybermen are.
If there's one thing we know about science fiction universes, they definitely do they do as Dune, Warhammer, Star Wars, Star Trek, yeah, all of them, mate. Where's the originality? Let's call it creative homages. Yeah, pretty cool. Also very iconic. And I think like Daleks have exterminate. Cybermen have got delete, which is pretty cool. Well, not very imaginative. It's just basically the Daleks. They've just basically done the same thing. Daleks say one word twice, and that's their catchphrase, but still cool.
Yeah.
And there's a couple other alien races to think about. The Slovene, who I think were David Tennant again, or we're introducing David Tennant.
You mean the green ones?
Not the green ones. They had the long claws, baby faces. They hid inside people's skins and stuff.
That was. I think they first came in with Christopher Eccleston. Yeah, that was the first time we saw them with Christopher Eccleston.
Right. Okay. They were very cool. That was the first time. Very iconic as well, but not as iconic as the Daleks or the Cybermen, but still cool. And I don't know, I found their baby faces kind of funny looking, weren't they? Yeah. And when they die, they make weird fart noises or something.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that got people liking Doctor Who, but then might have turned people off later on, was that the aliens are always low budget. Like, unlike Star Wars or Star Trek, well, earlier Star Trek, it was low budget, but later on they put money to it. But I think maybe a generation was like, I can watch like better looking aliens with Star Trek or Star Wars or other things.
Maybe that's why I lost its appeal a bit.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that's something that's 100% iconically Doctor Who, having like aliens that look aesthetically like not really that much, but you care less about it because like the story behind it's really good.
Yeah, I guess so. It definitely agree. I definitely agree with you there that Doctor Who always had this low budget feel. Like the Daleks come and they put a plunger on them, but just like a lot of the outfits and stuff you'd see throughout the series they reuse, and they wouldn't. The CGI was always a bit borderline. But I guess BBC productions, they only got so much, and is that technically taxpayers' money?
Yeah, it is taxpayers' money.
So actually, that's the funny thing when you think about like science fiction. Doctor Who's like essentially British, literally the most British science fiction because it's coming from taxpayers' money, really, isn't it? Oh, nice. Well, this new series better be bloody good. Well, I'll come beat up David Tennant myself. Okay. Any other alien races? Actually, before we go on to a key individual,
the ones who look like potatoes. so basically,
the Sultarans.
The Sultarans. Yeah.
Why did that just come? The ones under that. That's so rude.
But that's what they look like.
I know, that's so funny.
And then you also had what were they called again? I think this was under David Tennant or maybe even Matt Smith. The snake-looking aliens, reptile-looking ones that you actually found out that they were the first sentient species on Earth. But during the Ice Age, they went into hibernation and went underground. And then somehow humanity had mistakenly woken them up, so they were about to invade. So the Doctor had to basically lull them back to sleep before they then took over the whole
the snake people. Lol. I mean, no, I don't think I ever saw that episode, but I think some of those snakes are walking around as we speak. Man, I should see some people I know. But yeah, definitely some iconic ones. I'm trying to think. It's not really an alien, but there was one episode when David Tennant's Doctor was on some like planet somewhere, and they discover the devil trapped down, that was very cool because once it wasn't science fiction or history, it was actually like religion and stuff. That was awesome.
Yeah, and I remember because he was telling people on the ship to telling a person on the ship or people on the ship to kill each other on the ship. And like the fact that it did actually get really dark. And even with David Tennant, they also had the werewolf episode.
Oh, I don't remember that, but
I think potentially it was that someone had wrote a story about it, and an alien had been able to then turn that story into real life, or potentially it was maybe an actual alien that's in wolf form. Because like even with Matt Smith character in, I think it was Venice or Verona where they went to, because it was like Renaissance Italy.
Yeah.
There was these like water vampires, like, so kind of like taking it from, remember
You mean water companies? Lol, bit of satire for you.
So you know did you watch the fourth Pirates of the Caribbean film? Where they have the mermaids,
yeah,
and the mermaids
yep.
basically like kill them, and then so in the show they would like suck people's blood. So that's where they got the myth from like vampires
right,
from.
okay, I see.
And
Yeah.
I think that's another thing that Doctor Who does, is like it melds sci-fi with fantasy, and it's like, oh, so that's why humanity sees something in a specific way, is because a certain alien was like that at the time.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. I guess it's like kind of explains folklore and mythology. It's actually just aliens in history, which could be true. I wouldn't be too far. I'm a believer of the aliens, or you know what I mean. Yeah. Wow, I screwed that one up. Didn't sound very convincing. I just sound like a wacky nut job now. So yeah, we've gone through some of the aliens, but who is the Master?
I know the first Master was played by Derek Jacobi, the one I remember from David Tennant's character. And I think he was
he's
someone.
A good actor. I've seen him a lot.
He was someone. I think he was a Time Lord who was exiled, and because of his exile, he wasn't there in the destruction of Gallifreyan. I think that's what their home planet's called. So because he wasn't a part of the destruction, he was able to then like skate life on the sidelines, and like he is, you could argue, as a single character, is the Doctor's arch nemesis.
Yeah.
And like he personally he also hates humans.
I don't blame him.
But it's more to do with like, because the Doctor Who loves and looks after humanity, he's like, well, because you like them, I'm going to destroy them. And I think there might actually be a specific relationship between the Master and the Doctor, but because I haven't watched like later episodes or later seasons, they might have not developed that. They might have developed it a lot further.
Could be, yeah. I am the wrong person to talk to about this, but yeah. No, it's cool to have everyone's got to always have an arch nemesis, I guess, and he fits that role quite well. Interesting enough. So we did touch on some Doctor Who films. I do remember one I'd seen, Daleks Invasion of Earth 2150 AD, which was in 1966. I do remember watching that as a kid, and that was in black and white. That was very cool, but there have been some more recent ones, which I failed in my research and recording. But if you think of any, do let me know. Well, there was the one in 1996, the American one, but I can't think of any others.
I do remember, like, one thing that Doctor Who always did when it came back was its Christmas specials, which were always extra long. So so if it was in America, you'd count it as like a TV movie that they'd always come out with in Christmas. So I know one of them, the one I can remember, was based on like the Titanic. But it was it was a
that's
Titanic.
iconic. Kylie Minogue was in it, wasn't she? Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah.
I think that's also the charm that makes it so British, is like the cameos you see in Doctor Who of like some of the actors that they bring in.
Yeah, they get some big people because it's such an iconic name. We haven't even spoken about the assistants, actually. The assistants also have, wow, so weird because they're such a sideman role. No, joke, I kid. Like, there's been so many assistants over years. Like, I think of Rose Tyler, Sarah Jane Smith.
Yes,
yeah, she was one. K9's not an assistant, but he's a iconic doggo, the Robo Doggo, who was in a couple of series.
Martha Jones as well, who was after Rose. Then you also had Donna, Catherine Tate's character. You had Amelia Pond, and I keep forgetting Rory. Yeah, Rory was her boyfriend. And
the Roman Centurion guy who's just a mannequin or something like that. I can't remember. And then there's a guy from really famous British actor who's been in a lot of gangster movies, like Kid
Noel Clarke, yeah.
Noel Clarke was in it and stuff. Like, you got some big names that have, either been launched by Doctor Who or just like starred in it just because they're like so famous and like were in it for a bit. And there's having Catherine Catherine Tate, and it's just great because if you're from the UK, you'd know Little Britain and you'd know the Catherine Tate show.
Yeah.
And they're just having her in it, just brilliant. Never thought she'd make such a good assistant, but she did actually. She damn well did. Here's a weird one for you. Did you know that there are a lot of Doctor Who audios or like audiobooks or podcasts?
I did hear that. That there's cassettes as well. They did also like because also BBC has BBC Radio. They had radio programs with Doctor Who, which are also part of the universe. Yeah, so I did know about them because I actually saw like an article on BBC Sound, like about all the different Doctors have like tapes which are part of like the Doctor Who universe, which are made canon.
Yeah, there are quite a few. Like The Chase that was released in 1966. That was the first one. Couple of others. State of Decay in 1981. Slipback, that was another one, or a radio drama as they called it. David Tennant, alongside Catherine Tate, did a collection of 3 audio adventures in 2016. And then in August 2020, Big Finish announced a new series of audios beginning of the release in May 2021, featuring Christopher Eccleston reprising his role as the Ninth Doctor, actually, funny enough. Nice. Yeah, he came back, he realised, oh, well, I don't mind being typecast a little. That's like so many years after. That's 2006. Like, wow, he's still going. And I think he was in Rings of Power. He's playing one of the elves in it, wasn't he? At the very beginning, he's one of the elves that gets killed in the Labour camp that was going on.
Yeah, and I think also there's been 3 or 4 games as well.
Oh, there's been games.
I know there's been 2. I think the one was like mobile games, so you could play on your phone. And they actually had full on like PC, Xbox, PlayStation games. I think some of them came on like some of the Nintendo consoles as well.
Oh wow!
I never bought them because I knew they'd be terrible.
Yeah, any video game adaptation of like a universe is always going to be a bit hit and miss, isn't it? Always a rough one to choose. And actually, there was even a podcast, which is just strange. Like, I need to listen to this podcast, but in 2022, BBC Sounds began airing Doctor Who Redacted, a 10-episode podcast written by Juno Dawson and starring Charlie Craggs and Jodie Whittaker, the Doctor at the time. So I don't know. Maybe it's actually just a making of discussion or something, as opposed to an actual audio drama, audiobook, audible, whatever people call them these days. Interesting, though. Very interesting. I might have to give them a listen. Or not. I think I've got better stuff to do.
Of course, I knew you weren't going to listen.
And of course, the spin-offs. We've got to talk about a lot of spin-offs. Yeah. So in the early 1970s, it's not really a spin-off, but you had a theatrical performance called Doctor Who and the Daleks in the 7 Keys to Doomsday. But you've also had lots of other theatrical performances, but I thought I'd just pick one out, and also because I was lazy in the research. Of course, in 2006, you had Torchwood, which, as I said, is an anagram for Doctor Who, and follows on from one of the characters you see in Doctor Who, which I think originally appeared in David Tennant's one.
No, Captain Jack. He actually appeared. I can even give you like the whole rundown.
Oh, go on.
So he appeared during like Christopher Eccleston's Doctor Who. Yeah. So what happens is that when the Slitheen, those baby-faced aliens, he was sent by the group that he works with to come back in time to deal with them.
Oh, right.
So then he's there, and so like it's kind of like a show off between himself and the Doctor. So like the Doctor has a sonic screwdriver, he has a sonic gun, so he can actually shoot around the floor and then just fall through a solid object.
Okay,
which is very clever. So he was back in time, and that's when he first met the Doctor. And at the end of the first series, you find out that everyone. I think they're fighting the Daleks, and then what happens is that Rose opens up the TARDIS, and then takes the power of the TARDIS, and then uses that to bring him back to life. And then Christopher Eccleston's character then takes the power from her, so she doesn't die. And because he's taken it from her, he then has to regenerate and then becomes David Tennant.
Right.
But because like Captain Jack has been brought back to life through the TARDIS, he's basically now a man outside of time. So technically, he will look exactly the same for all of time. And you even see it.
What? So he's immortal now?
Yeah, 100% full on immortal. And it's not like the stage of like, oh, if he dies, he dies. No, like in season 4 of Torchwood, no, season 3 of Torchwood, he gets blown up, like blown to bits. And like they basically get his skull, a bit of his leg, a bit of his arm. They put it in like, you know, the bags they put dead people in.
Yeah.
And they basically end up regrowing parts of each other. So they start to grow.
Gross.
And like and the worst one was like, you could hear him screaming, like in pain. And he's like, he even said, I think in Torchwood, when he first found out, like he tried to find so many different ways to try and kill himself.
Yeah.
So then he realized maybe I'm here for a purpose. And that's when he then established Torchwood to then, at times when the Doctor can't be there to help, then Torchwood can come in and save the day and then use, like, for example, the tech he has from the future to basically help humanity.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I watched it briefly, Torchwood, but yeah, I didn't realize there was so much to his character. I thought he was just like the swaggering American they had to put in a British TV show because he's quite iconic for that. Okay, well, I'll have to give that a watch if I could be bothered.
I would say you should, because I think one thing that I do like about it is that it has full-on adult humor.
Right, as opposed to Doctor Who, which is a bit more family-orientated.
And I would say, especially with season 3, especially like the politics around, like I told you before, like the government was about to write off and say, yeah, these are the kids that we're selecting to go off and die, so the rest of the kids don't die. It's like a really cool, I think it's like a really interesting storyline. And like season 4 of Torchwood was like full-on Americanized, like it was mostly based out in the States.
Right.
And it was about an alien group who prevented humanity from dying.
Right, okay.
But then the issue,
and that's a bad thing, is it?
It is, because
well, I guess
it didn't cause them to be, it wouldn't cause them to regenerate. It would just stop them from dying.
Yeah.
So then, for example, which was really sad, like if someone was hit by a car, their legs wouldn't fix and they died, they would just come back and then they wouldn't actually be dead. Their legs would be broken. And like they even said in one of the discussions, like with the UN discussions, was like they also had an issue with babies that had been aborted because they couldn't die. So it wasn't like, you know, everyone thinks about, immortality is really perfect, but it only is perfect if there's anti-aging and also that you can constantly heal. But if it was more of like, we're preventing a whole planet, people actually dying. So they got to the stage, like if someone was in a coma and would have passed away, or if someone doesn't have the lung capacity to basically,
they'll just keep dying.
They'll keep dying. They wouldn't actually die. They'd still be alive,
but they'd be in pain.
In pain for so long,
oh, that is
and
cool.
like that. So the only solution they found was like literally incinerating them.
That's ironic,
and like
isn't
burning
it?
them down to a single molecule. And I think a reason I really loved the show was because like it answered the question, what would humanity do if people couldn't die? So they even had to bring up laws about what is murder. If you can't kill someone, then
technically there's no murder. Yeah.
But then people were saying, but then you could leave someone. You could leave someone in a vegetative state. So would that be counted as murder?
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think the main person, it was like he was kind of like a villain, but also a character. He ends up saving the day at the end. Was this guy, an American actor? You probably will recognize him if you watch the show, who had murdered. I think he was like a pedophile who'd murdered and molested children, and he got the lethal injection just when the people stopped dying.
Right.
So people were like, he technically died, so we can't give him the injection again because that technically is inhumane, because the injection says we will give you the lethal injection for you to die. So they had to basically let him go.
Right, okay.
Because if the law says he must die, and he actually did die, I think his lawyers argued that he can't be killed again because, one, people can't die, and two, he technically did die.
It's a loophole in the law.
Yeah.
What if you survive and become a zombie? Yeah. It's a good point. It's a good what-if question, really, because, you know...
So I just quickly about it. And the issue then for Jack was that Jack wasn't regenerating. So for the first time for himself, he actually realized that actually this is what pain feels like, or the fact that he couldn't just throw his life around. Like before, he would like jump in front of trains, be in a situation where a bomb could go off, but he could actually had to face his mortality. And if you've seen the film 8 Mile,
Yeah.
so you know the
tearjerker, big tearjerker.
you know the black guy who announces the rap battles.
I can't remember.
He's also in ER. If you watch that at all.
Oh, sorry, I was getting confused between the Green Mile and
no,
8
8
Mile.
Mile,
8
8
Mile,
Mile,
yeah,
8
the
Mile.
Eminem story. Yeah.
So he's also in it, and he was I think he was an FBI or CIA agent, and he was shot in the chest.
Right.
But the issue is that because he can't die, he's constantly bleeding from his chest. So he literally has to replace the bandages over and over again.
Yeah, his clothes must be ruined.
Yeah, and you then think to yourself, like, if someone is bleeding and they've been shot to a stage that they would have died, they would then have to constantly change bandages, which he has to do. Like, open and take off a bandage, put it back in. And because it damaged his lung, he can't run as fast. So he's always out of breath after a period of time.
Yeah, so it's not... They could live forever, but it's not a quality of life.
Yeah.
It's a good, like, what if question to be answered, because, humanity is always, people always talking about, like, extending a life, trying to live forever, and what if we finally get it? But this is, like, a dark, twisted alternative of it that, well, you could live forever, but you might not be a quality of life. So it's interesting, quite a cool storyline. And in terms of some other spin-offs, we had the Sarah Jane Adventures in 2007. Did you watch any of those?
Yeah. So that was more aged, well... Torchwood was aged to 18 and over, full on, you'd say R-rated Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And then Sarah Jane Adventures. I think the one thing I did like about it was like it was their version of aiming it at children.
Right.
And
okay.
it then continued the storyline of Sarah Jane, who'd also been an
K9
assistant
as well.
Yeah, and I think it was really nice, especially because I know Jeffrey watched it, and it was a really good show. It lasted, I think, 5 or 6 series, and I think it had to stop, unfortunately, because the actress who played her, passed away.
Oh, no. Christ, that's so soon. Oh, no, that's a shame. It's a loss to the Doctor Who franchise, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think one thing that was also nice is that sometimes you would have spin-offs where David Tennant's Doctor would actually appear in Sarah Jane Adventures. And I think one of the episodes I really loved was in season 4 of Doctor Who. They then were like, you know what? It's either season 4 or season 3. We're going to bring everyone who's involved. So they brought in Sarah Jane Adventures. Oh, yeah, it was the episode, it was the finale where David Tennant's Doctor was fighting the Master.
Right, okay, that one.
So then one thing I really loved about that was that, if I'm getting it correctly, they brought in Torchwood because it was such a big event, and also the fact the Master was...
They got everyone together.
So they brought in the people from Sarah Jane Adventures, they brought the people from Torchwood, they also brought in the fans also from the show would also remember that Rose decided to stay in the alternate universe, I think.
Boring.
To be with her.
Damn it, Rose.
I think so. And I think Noel Clarke decided to also, his character, to stay in the alternate universe.
Right.
And then also earlier on, you found out that the Doctor also has a clone.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. And that's big news.
So I think the one thing I really liked about it was that everyone was there together. So like, imagine if there's at the end of, let's say, the next big film, you know how with Endgame everybody was there at the end, like that type of feeling and then they wrote it really well that it would make sense that this threat would also affect each individual person, and that they'd have to then work together to eliminate it. Yeah,
otherwise they all die.
Yeah,
I am inevitable. And then Thanos should be in the next Doctor Who series.
And then you found out at the end that you remember the face of Bo. You know that huge head that's in Doctor Who, that's in David Tennant's Doctor, Christopher Eccleston's Doctor as well.
I can't remember.
It's basically this huge head that's in a tank of water, and it's been alive from time immemorial, and it's called the Face of Bo. And at the end of that, Jack says to Doctor, "Oh, you know my nickname is the Face of Bo." So it's most likely that Jack, because he can't die, ends up turning into that huge head that basically the Doctor always seems to speak to him for advice. So like when Christopher Eccleston meets him for the first time, he announces him like, oh, he's a very old being with knowledge beyond most civilizations. And it's weird that that's how Jack's character then became.
Right, okay. If there was sort of an era in time you could travel to as the Doctor, what era would you travel to and why?
I think that's the issue with me with time travel, is that I think people always think the past is such a nice place to go to. But then as a historian and as a historian as yourself that loves history, you then realize some of these places aren't as good as you think they are. Like people, oh, I'd love to go back to the 60s, yes, but most houses didn't have actual indoor plumbing.
There's tons of slums, there's a lot more poverty, people are generally a lot poorer.
Then you also have to remember the air was awful because of smog.
Yeah.
And then you're like,
Food
okay,
probably
then,
was really crap.
yeah, maybe I would then go back the 1800s, and you're like, yeah, that's just also a whole lot worse, and let's not forget crime, and then
dysentery.
also like sewage on the floor, and
the
people
great
throwing
of London.
Yeah, so if it was me, I would say potentially like the high period of the Roman Empire, because like
I should have known,
because that is probably one of the safest time periods, especially if you're focusing on Europe, or potentially going to. If you're staying in Europe, the Roman Empire would probably be the best period.
Yeah.
Because I watched like this recent video a historian did that like medicine, architecture, and other things until the 1800s, they hadn't reached that type of level since the Roman Empire. It's like even they said medicine.
No, so that was actually a peak
like,
in like advancement at that point in time.
Yeah. And like in Europe, so I'd probably go to... Thinking about it now, I'd probably go to like high point period in China actually to see like the Imperial Empire during that time period.
Yeah, when they created forks and gunpowder.
Because I think
that's right, forks came from China,
and the paper as well. Writing on paper came from there as well. A lot of things. I think like the typewriter, the printing press was a German invention, but based off the typewriting system that was used to type characters from China.
Oh, right. Okay. I did not know that. But yeah, China came across so many modern inventions before the West that it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
You can even find like traces of Chinese culture in like burials, in like ancient burials in Europe, like for example, burials of Vikings.
Yeah.
They have traces of Chinese silk and stuff. It's crazy how far that went.
Yeah, and even just, I know this isn't our history podcast, but the fact that historians are like, in the 900 AD, or even further, I think even they said like 800 AD, the China could have gone to the Americas if they wanted to. They had the technology to do so, but they're like...
Well, there are some theories that they did.
Yeah, and like even historians falsifying evidence to make it seem like they did.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to see some pretty solid evidence, but there's other theories like ancient Egypt discovered America first, or the Polynesians. There could be loads. It'd be good to do an episode on it. I think if I could go back to any time in history, I would probably go back to when I was born and just like Obi-Wan Kenobi with Luke Skywalker, just linger from a distance, just every now and then when I know there's a pivotal point in my life, just say, hey, just do this, don't do that. I know you're going to do that, but do
so
this.
fixing the timeline, fixing the Morgan timeline.
It's screw going back to like some dangerous times like the Roman Empire. It might have been safe in Rome, but they got pillaged every now and then as well. Like
that is true.
I'd rather do something more useful. Just go back to like 1999 and buy Bitcoin.
You then don't want to then F up the timeline in a way that it then messes your life up. So like there's decisions you made that made you who you are. So then if you alter those decisions, would you still be Morgan? And like I think that's why I always want to go like far in the past, because I don't want to then screw something up so awfully that, for example, I don't have a certain amount of siblings, or I don't live in London, I live in Birmingham.
Yeah, but what about you going back to the high point of Roman Empire? What if somehow that stops the fall of the Roman Empire and we're all speaking like a form of Italian,
form of
a more developed form of Latin.
Technically, you could kind of say that France, Portugal, Italy, and Spain kind of speaking.
Yeah. They do Latin based, but we could have been speaking.
But even
more
funny
Latin-based.
enough, some fans have been like, Christopher Eccleston mentioned, I think in the second episode, like he was speaking to Rose, oh, where do you want to go in time? And he says also, do you want to go to the revival of the Roman Empire, which he also mentions, and it's something they haven't done. I think with Doctor Who, I think one of the things that I do have that I wish they did more is go further into the universe. It kind of feels like
more what ifs rather than like
also,
actual history.
And also talking about the different like alien races and cultures. So it's like, oh, we need an alien that's like this. Okay, let's create this one with very little backstory, but they're on Earth and they want to take over type of thing.
Well, exactly. It's like Star Wars lazy writing for the alien races. They don't really treat them with like the attention that, say, Star Trek gives and Mass Effect.
Yeah.
But still, it's cool. But it's like, this is why I didn't like Doctor Who, because I find it kind of cheap sci-fi. Like the design is kind of cheap looking, even though some of it's good design, but it all looks very like thrown together and plasticky, and like even the storylines can be a bit weak. There's some cool what if ideas, but I don't know. I guess I need to actually watch it before I judge.
I 100% agree. I think that's what kind of pushed me off a bit from Doctor Who, was that the storylines were coming a bit repetitive. And I think that's when like I got access to like a lot more American TV shows, and then I would watch stuff like, even though I was late to the party, watch stuff like Lost, and also watch other TV shows that were American based. And I think also recently, like when Marvel started doing like their TV shows, especially the ones through Netflix,
Secret Invasion, WandaVision,
and like even earlier with the Netflix shows, or people watching Stranger Things.
Yeah, I even got like John Cage, Luke Cage,
and like the fact that there's so many things to watch now. I'm like, do I really have time for Doctor Who? And I think that's the more thing for me, is like I've got like The Last Kingdom, Vikings that I was watching at the time, Game of Thrones.
It's overstimulation.
Like, can you go back
Yeah.
after watching an episode of Game of Thrones? Can you go back to Doctor Who and watch it in the same way? No, you can't, because you're like, is this too childish at this point in time? And I think that's kind of like
watch Sarah Jane Adventures.
I think that's kind of the thing for me. But one thing that I would never want to do is go to the future.
Yeah,
because then like the issue with going to the future is then knowing things that are going to happen. If someone brought tech from the future and gave it to me, I'd be fine. But going to the future is like, could bring up like so many different bad things. Like you would then definitely look into, oh, so what am I in the future? And then knowing that could like mess up your life.
Exactly. Like when you return to the present day, you're like, oh God, I've got to stop this from happening.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, it could be really dystopian. You know, it could be terrible. Well,
or potentially, I think the one thing I would do if I'd ever go to the future, ignore everything else, just go to the Euro million numbers and be like, okay, then, so the million numbers for this week is this, and this. And also the next big tech company, Facebook, going back to 2003 and be like, you know what? I win the Euro millions and then invest it into Facebook.
You'll
that
literally
type of
be
thing.
the richest man on the planet by far.
Yeah.
In the most suspicious way possible. Yeah.
Like one of the things I would do is, during the Euros, before the Euros started, Greece were 1,000 to 1 to win.
Oh, yeah.
1,000 to 1 when they won in 2004. And I was thinking, if you put £1, you'd get 1,000.
10 quid.
If you put 10 quid, that's 10,000. So if I would have been a child at the time, but if I could go back in time, and if there were odds similar to that, like when Leicester won the league, there were odds, I think 300 to 1. Like imagine like if you could go back in time, take all your finances, knowing this is going to happen, dump it on Leicester winning the Premier League, you'd be making yourself a millionaire.
Well, we could just do that today, man. Just bet 10 quid on like multiple crappy teams, and who knows? It's not such a big loss if you like have a cutoff point. Otherwise, that's when gambling becomes a problem.
Yeah, because then the team starts to do well, and you're like, you know what? Let me put an extra £30 and the next 30 and another 30. Yeah,
and then before you know it, you're in trouble.
Yeah,
exactly. There's this great saying in Kung Fu Panda: yesterday is history, tomorrow a mystery, but today is a gift. That is why they call it the present. And that's from Kung Fu Panda. Great movie.
I think they might have stolen it for somewhere else.
Yeah,
but it is a very
sounds
good
too
story.
wise for Country Panda. But I thought that was apt for Doctor Who, and I'm afraid that's all we got time for.
One quick
today.
question.
Go on.
What would, because with Doctor Who, there's always technology and tech to be used. What tech would you want from the future? So, like, for example, with stuff like headphones, would you like to have like headphones that are actually within your mind? So they're sonic headphones, so you're no longer having to put headphones on. So what technology from the future would you want to have now?
Something that when you lose the TV remote, something that finds it for you in the house.
Ah, okay.
I think that'd be pretty handy. What about you?
Me, I would say possibly. I'd probably say something like I would probably say like a laptop. Just think like if a laptop in 70 or 80 years, like how much storage it would have, how fast it would be. But then I always think to myself that if I then do have it, then if it crashes, I'm stuck.
But how would you know how to use it? You'd have to like
that
work
is also
out
true. Yeah.
in that point in time, like the interface and everything. It might not even be Apple or Android. It could be like Purple, like whatever the name of that, some future tech company is that's doing that. But anyway, that's all we have time for this week, folks. It's been great having you on and talking about Doctor Who, my least favourite science fiction universe. It's great having you here, Josh.
Yeah, but thankfully you should be happy we'll be going to Loki next, and that is one of your favourite.
Can't wait. Loki season 2. It's been fantastic.
It is.
As you might have known, Pick Up the Mic, which is the podcast umbrella we're part of as the Two Maesters. We went to Comic-Con recently and it was a damn good time. We'll have plenty of footage coming out where we've been interviewing some really cool cosplayers, ranging from anime that I had no idea what it was, to Obi-Wan Kenobi, to even Donald Trump, which I'd argue isn't really cosplay, but still very cool. So, as per usual, if you really like us, please give us a like, give us a follow, share us with your friends. And if you want to find out when our next episode is, click the notification button below. And if you really, really have won the lottery, you went back in time and put £2 on Facebook in 2003 and you're now a gazillionaire, then please donate to our Patreon, because we could always do with the extra dollar.
Yes, we need to fund our own TARDIS.
Yeah, exactly. How are me and Jeffrey going to go get these wonderful pieces of technology from the future? That's all, folks. Have a nice one.
See you, folks.